Today is May 19th, 2008. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm working on a project called Women of the Oklahoma Legislature, and it's for the OSU Library. And today I'm with Nancy Riley, who's a senator. Let's see if I get my dates right. You were elected in 2000?
That's correct.
And re-elected in 2004.
Yes.
And getting ready to
go one more time.
Go one more time. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you for allowing me to come visit with you today. And let's get started by having you tell a little bit about your childhood, and then we'll move forward.
Okay. Well, I am Nancy Riley. I am from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Born at Hillcrest Hospital there in Tulsa. Lived in the same house all my life until I got married. Went to one elementary school, one junior high, and graduated from Tulsa Edison as a bicentennial baby in 1976. My dad was a teacher. My mom was a homemaker. I had a very stable life. I was the last of 4 children. My oldest brother is 20 years older than I am, so there's a large gap between the first and the last. I'm the only girl, and my brothers would tell you I was the family pet, and in their opinion, very highly spoiled and granted everything that I wanted, but I would disagree with that. And went to 3 years of college at Oklahoma Christian University. Left school to marry my high school sweetheart. We went to OSU, and I put him through to finish his degree at OSU for 1.5 years. We lived in married student housing there at OSU. He was a very driven man and graduated in 3.5 years from OSU. So we soon arrived back at home in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we went to work in the family business with Streets TV and Appliances there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and began to raise our family. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl, ideal family, great setting. I was a stay-at-home mom. He was the working dad, very active in our church, and played softball, and he was the coach, and he played softball at church. And things went very, very well until he was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And when my oldest was 4 and my youngest was 2, he passed away. And that was a real shock. That was put a screeching halt to all of the plans and dreams that I had as a growing up child. Pretty focused. I knew I wanted to major in elementary education, and knew I wanted to be a stay-home mom. I knew where I wanted to go. I was pretty driven, knew where I was going, and then I had a curve thrown at me and had to start all over again.
After that, what was next then?
Well, after that, during his 18-month illness, I went to work. So we would have an income because he was no longer able to work. He was bedfast with the brain tumor, wasn't able to drive, had seizures. Went to work for Tulsa Public Schools as a teacher's assistant at the Early Childhood Development Center, and rode the bus with 4-year-olds. It was a great experience. Went every morning and picked them up on the bus route, worked with them all day long at school, and then took them home on the bus, which was a wonderful experience because most of them would fall asleep. So I would get to pick them up from their seat and actually carry them to the doorstep to hand them over to the parent that was at that house. And it was so much fun. And went to school at night at the University Center of Tulsa at Langston to finish up my elementary degree. Did that for 1.5 years. So I had to put my kids in daycare, there was a big culture shock from being a stay-at-home mom to putting my kids in daycare for the day, and then finding sitters that would keep them at night while I went to class. A lot of times I had to take them with me to class because I was attending night school there at the campus, and they learned to sit and be very quiet in an adult situation while we were attending class. Did that, as I said, for 1.5 years. Did my student teaching at Hoover Elementary with the Tulsa Public School Systems in 1st grade, and was very fortunate to be able to spend the whole semester in 1st grade. Graduated from Langston University, married Jerry Riley, my current husband, which I was very, very blessed that the Lord saw fit to grant me a father for my children at that point in time, which was very much needed. We moved into a larger house at that point in time. I substituted around the Tulsa County for about 1 year and was able to go to work with Tulsa Public Schools back in the school that I had done my student teaching in at Hoover Elementary, which was wonderful. I knew the system, I knew the teachers, I knew the kids. at that point, my kids were old enough to go to school with me, so I was able to take my two kids with me to Hoover, and they were in the same building with me as I taught there. I was very privileged to work at Hoover Elementary for 13 years. Saw kids go through the system and watched the progress of the neighborhood for 13 years there at Hoover, and then decided to run for public office, partly because of the background that I had with the diversity, being a stay-at-home mom, being a single mom, going to work, being on government assistance, and having to learn the system of what works and what doesn't work, and the red tape that goes along with welfare and need for family services and daycare, those kinds of things. Becoming a blended family, because my present husband has two children, so we had to bring those elements together with two older siblings and the two younger siblings. And then we were also blessed to have one more child. So we have his and mine and ours. So I knew that part of the system as well. Having gone through the death of a spouse, I knew that. I knew the hospice situation and how that can come in and help families at a very early age. At the age of 27 is how old I was when my husband died. So I had to learn all of that. So I thought, with that background, with being committed to public service, as my father had been a teacher and I had been a teacher, I just really felt called to run for public office to serve families in a bigger capacity. And that's when I ran in the year 2000 for the Oklahoma State Senate.
Before that point, like in high school, had you been interested in politics?
I was not interested in politics at all. That was not even on the horizon. As I said earlier, I was very driven. I knew kind of what my course was going to be. I knew where I was going to go to college. I knew what I was going to study. I, had that all laid out there. Politics was not in the mix at all. And my husband, Jerry Riley, ran for the state senate shortly after we had gotten married. And that was a whole introduction to the realm of politics and how it worked. Before that, I'm not even sure I could have told you who my state senator or my state representative was. Pretty much like the normal people out there. You knew who the governor was, you knew who the president was. And as far as that, as long as they stayed out of your life, that was good. So I had no desire to be in politics. Thought that was not an arena that I wanted to be in. But there was just a part of me that said, I have to give back in a bigger capacity. I love serving kids. I love serving families. But in a middle-class neighborhood, as Hoover Elementary is, it was a limited amount of influence that I could have on those families and those kids. And I had found in the 13 years that I was at Hoover, we had gone from a very stable neighborhood of two parents, the stay-at-home mom, the working dad, a very moderate income family, where kids came to first grade already knowing how to read for the most part. Mm-hmm. And in the progress of 13 years watching those kids, that same neighborhood, that same building, go to have kids who on a daily basis we had to call the Department of Human Services for child abuse and neglect for somebody in our building, for kids that I had in my classroom who did not know who was going to pick them up at the end of the day. I could just tell their little clock that by 2:30 they were so frightened because they didn't know at the end of the day who they were going home with or if they were going to go home. They never knew. We had kids that were there from 5 o'clock, 5:30, with nobody to pick them up when we would have to call the police department to come and pick them up. To kids who didn't even know who their last name was, had a multiple array of siblings in their homes that all had different last names. They didn't know who their father was. They had mother's live-in boyfriend, or they lived with the grandparents, or some kind of an arrangement that we watched the deterioration of the family life in that very stable neighborhood and the impact that it had on kids. By the end of my 13th year, I had children that I was actually having to teach the alphabet to, rather than kids who had come to me reading. And I said, there has to be a better way that I can impact the children of Oklahoma and make sure that their life is as stable as possible. With my background, with my knowledge of how the system works and how it doesn't work, there has to be more that I can do. And that's when my husband very, very overwhelmingly supported my decision to run for the state senate, to be able to help families and children on a statewide basis.
Well, talk a little bit about your campaign then. How did you have a slogan and a campaign manager? What?
And I'm very fortunate in that my husband studied political science in his early college career, and he's always been my campaign manager.
Okay.
And it's very good. We keep it all in house, and that's all we talk about. Bless my kids' hearts; they have to they have to put up with politics for most of the year when we talk about re-election cycles and things that are going on the national level. Jerry runs my campaign, always has. Ran the lieutenant governor's race for me 2 years ago, and put "Our children are our future" has always been our campaign slogan from the very beginning, because I believe our children are our greatest resource here in the state of Oklahoma. They have so much potential to improve our state, and we have such a responsibility to give them everything that they deserve on our statewide level. I ran in the year 2000 against a man who had been in the legislature for 12 years. Senator Lewis Long had been here for 12 years, and I had no beef with what he had done. I did not run against Senator Long. I ran on my own platform of helping families and putting kids first. And it was an uphill battle. He had a very big war chest. I, scraped together $5 and $10 donations here and there to run the campaign. Had a lot of in-kind contributions, blood, sweat, and tears that went on with the campaign. We campaigned from the moment school was out, and I would get home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon until dark. And then when school was out, I campaigned full time until school started again in August. And was never allowed to, or never did, talk about the campaign trail at school. So we didn't have the conflict of what I was doing versus what I was trying to do. My boss fully knew that I was running for the state senate. So that was very clear as to what I could discuss and what I couldn't discuss at the school site. But we had a very large uphill battle. The demographics of the district was very heavily distributed on the other end of the party that I was working towards. But we worked very, very hard, very, very diligently, and it was just my husband and I. We had no volunteer base. It was just the two of us and our kids that went out and knocked doors in the heat and handed out our brochures and made our points. There were no public debates, no meetings between the incumbent and myself. And it was all during of course, 2000, during the hanging chad cycle of the major elections. It was very interesting when the final results came in. But at the end, I won by 167 votes in the precinct polls, and then we won a slight margin in the absentee ballot. So the total was less than 250 votes that we won by in the year 2000. So it was pretty exciting. And on top of all of that, I was on jury duty the week of the elections. So I was stuck downstairs in the basement of the courthouse instead of being able to go out and campaign, finding out what the results were, those kinds of things. I was at the county courthouse on jury duty by the time we ran the results and had everything wrapped up on that Tuesday. We really didn't know the end of the results until late Wednesday by the time they had counted the absentee ballots. So it was a pretty stressful election cycle. We really did not expect to win the first time out. I was a political unknown. I had no connections with the party at all. We were just extremely blessed by the Lord to win the campaign cycle. So it was quite a shock to go from teaching my first graders, which I had 17 that year in my final first grade class, to being sworn in here at the state capitol and just thrown into the mix up here. Big difference. I went from knowing what I was doing and being pretty good at teaching first graders, knowing the curriculum, having some sense of accomplishment, to an arena where I knew nothing. And it was quite a challenge.
What was the swearing in day like?
It was a disaster. Out of all of my years that I've been here, it was a disaster because we had breakfast with the governor that morning. My husband and my youngest son drove up here with me that morning, and they dropped me off at the mansion gates at 7:30. I had breakfast with the governor, and they made me sit on his left side. Here's Lieutenant, here's the governor, and I'm just right next to him, and I'm about to look for a hole in the floor. It's like, I'm not used to being around people of dignity and high class and those kinds of things. That you know, that was not the arena. I was used to being in charge with first graders. I knew how to talk to kids, but not adults. And so I'm sitting next to Frank Keating having a conversation about some things that we highly disagreed about. During a breakfast, like we were talking about career tech. And he had a slightly different opinion than I did on career tech. And so all during breakfast, which I couldn't eat at all, I was so nervous over. I'm like, okay, do I have a discussion about career tech with the governor at this point in time? I'm just, I'm being sworn in today. I'm a newly elected official. So I'm totally ill at ease with what's going on. I have all these dignitaries around the table. The lieutenant governor has come in and all the senators are here. Well, anyway, I got through breakfast. Needless to say, didn't eat anything and was as nervous as a cat. Had another senator bring me back over to the building, drove over back to the building. The pro tem called me into his office. Said, I need to talk to you right away. I was like, oh, man, what have I done? I know I've beaten a 12-year incumbent, but please, give me a break. Well, then on top of that, I had no office to go to, no place to land, to put my things. So I had to basically bunk in with another senator with all of my bags and entourage and those kinds of things, trying to find a place for interviews, and people were coming in and out wanting to have quotes and pictures. And I had no idea where my husband and my son were at this point in time. I had no clue as to where they were. And the minority floor leader called me into his office as well, and I had never met him. Senator Snyder called me in, and so we had to go in and sit and chat with him. I felt like I had been called into the principal's office. I just knew I was in huge trouble for something I had no idea, but here I am talking to the leader of my party, whom I had never met, but being grilled about all of my campaign and what I thought I was going to do up here and those kinds of things. And I kind of managed to get through that one. And Senator Snyder's not known to be a very gentle man. He's pretty gruff at that time. So I got through that one, then immediately had to go down and talk to the pro tem in the pro tem's office, which was Stratton Taylor at the time. And I walked into his office, and it was not just him, but it was also Kelly Haney, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I was really nervous over that one. I'm like, what do I say? What do I do? I don't know. I don't know what my job is here. I don't know what my role is here. I know I'm in big trouble. I probably will be put in the basement, for beating a 12-year incumbent of the majority party. I know that there can't be anything good come out of this meeting. And on top of that, I got lost going to his office because I couldn't figure out the rotunda. I hadn't seen a map. I didn't know where anybody's office is. So I had to stop and ask 3 times how to get to the pro tem's office. And he made me sit outside his office and wait for 15 minutes, which really made me nervous on top of that. But it was really kind of pleasant. He was just, introducing himself and kind of giving us some words of wisdom and a little bit of advice on how to get along and do things like that. So that one went fairly well. So then after that, I went back up to the office that I had borrowed. I had a reporter come in and ask me exactly what I thought I was doing up here, and I just burst into tears. At that point, I was just exhausted and stressed out. And he says, well, obviously you have no clue as to what you're doing up here. I said, obviously I don't. I think I want to go back to my classroom and my 17 kids, and just cried through the entire interview. It was not a pretty picture. It was not a good morning. And finally found my husband in the rotunda wandering around. And of course, he had no place to lie, no office, no nothing like that. And he was kind of exhausted from toting around our 10-year-old son and trying to keep up with him and keep him appeased at that point. Went down to sit on the floor to be sworn in the chamber. And I was one of 3 Republicans that were elected that year. And we sat in the incumbent seat whom we had beaten. So I was sitting over on the Democratic side away from the colleagues in my caucus, which made me a little uncomfortable as well, not knowing any of the people that were there. And we had to stand up and introduce the people that were in the gallery that had come to support us. Well, that was old hat for the people who had just been reelected, but for those of us, the 3 of us that were new there, we had no idea what to say, what the protocol was, how to go about the right phrasing, those kinds of things. So it was pretty nerve-wracking. Fortunately, I was the last of the 3 because they went alphabetical. So I kind of had time to observe and watch what the other ones were doing. And then we had to go up to the bench to be sworn in. And lo and behold, Senator Stipe, bless his heart, everybody should have a Senator Stipe story to tell. Senator Stipe, who, we all knew was the Prince of Darkness, came over and escorted me from my desk up to the front of the chamber. And I thought, I know I'm just really in trouble now if Senator Stipe knows who I am and has come to escort me forward. So I stood by Senator Stipe for my swearing in. And by that time, then we were finished. And that was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Wow. So that was the swearing in day. And for the new kid on the block, for not having any idea of what to expect, for being a basically very shy person, it was a disaster. So I vowed right then and there that the next group of freshmen that came in would never have to go through what I had gone through. I would prepare them for what was going to happen that day and in the committee process and what the procedure was and the right things to say. So I guess it was a good experience because I learned how to help other people from that. And I was the freshman, I was in charge of freshman orientation from that point on for the new group. And they'd never had done anything like that. So I had to compile a handbook of the protocol and the procedures of how to do things and the right things to say and how to run a committee and when you sit at a formal dinner, which group of setting silverware and glassware is yours, what kind of conversation you have and what you don't say, what you do and what you don't do in a formal setting, which most men have no clue as to what to do. So I guess on one hand it was a good thing, but on the other hand it was very difficult on a personal level.
Your teacher skills came.
I guess they did. I guess they did.
What about the first time you presented a bill? Or a debate, whichever one.
Yeah, I'm not much of a debater, and the first bill that I presented in committee went fairly well. It was a rather benign bill that the tourism department brought to me to run, and I have since learned that there is a method to getting freshmen oriented in the bill procedure. They usually are very benevolent in their committees, that the committee chair will look through bills and say, okay, give that one to a freshman, let the freshman carry that one, whatever, so that we don't have any just really controversial bills. And having it presented in committee was not too difficult as a tourism bill. It was pretty mundane. But when you get on the floor, we have the tradition of really giving your first time bill presentation a difficult time. And nobody tells us, as a freshman, nobody tells you that. So you stand up ready and of course I'm armed to the hilt with homework and pieces of paper and knowledge and information. And I had a stack of papers this high for a 1-page bill and ready to roll. And then they start asking you questions that have nothing to do with the bill. I remember one question in particular from Senator Crutchfield was the fact that how would my bill impact parks and recreation areas that were on a lake, and the water table that had to do with how, because it was about making anything that people were renting as far as a product for our state parks, like a vendor or something, making them be a permanent type of facility, or making some kind of an improvement to your kiosk or those kinds of things in the state park systems. And so Senator Crutchfield wanted to know what impact that would have on our lakes and our water level and our water tables. And I was like, I don't have an answer for that one. I have no idea. But they would come up with all of these just really bizarre questions that you have to answer on the Senate floor. And then, of course, everybody votes no on your very first bill. Everybody votes no on it. And so you're sitting up very nervous with your first bill, and you're looking at the board and it's all red. And so you're really, you're just devastated for your first bill. And then one by one, slowly, they change their votes to be a green vote. And then you get a standing ovation after presenting your first bill and having it pass in the legislature. So it's really kind of a fun initiation from the legislature.
Well, did you move here? Or do you drive back and forth?
I drive back and forth during the session. I come up on Sunday evenings and I go home on Thursday nights. We have a place here that we stay at. during the session, and that was very difficult. I was so glad for cell phones because the first session, my 10-year-old didn't quite understand the process, even though he had campaigned with us and he kind of knew what was going on. We had the ritual of I would call him every morning and do the mother thing long distance. You know, did you brush your teeth? Did you comb your hair? Did you make your bed? Do you have your backpack? You know, are you ready to get on the bus? Those kinds of things. Even though my husband was home with the mother and we still have to run down the list. And then I would call him every day when he would get home from school. Of course, his two elder siblings were there, so he wasn't home alone. But I would call him when he would get home and say, did you get home with your backpack? What homework do you have? How was your day? And then call him every night about 8:30 and tuck him in at night. And for the first 2 weeks, the question at the end of the day was, Mama, are you coming home tonight?
It's hard to.
I'd say, no, honey, I'll be home tonight. I'll call you in the morning. Okay, Mama. And then in the morning, we'd have the same conversation, and the next day would be the same question. Mama, are you coming home tonight? No, baby, I'll be home, on Thursday. So it took my 10-year-old a while to figure out that Mama wasn't going to be home. And my husband was very, very good to drive up on Wednesday evenings. We would meet in Stroud for dinner. He would bring my 10-year-old and we would meet in Stroud for dinner every week. That I was able to do that. So that would kind of break up the monotony for him. And he's turned out to be a very remarkable kid. He's 18, he's graduated this year. He's a high school senior. And we've gotten some of the letters that he wrote, some of the essays that he's wrote. His teachers have sent them. And it's all about his enthusiasm for his mom as the senator. And he wants to grow up to be a senator someday. So at the age of 10 and 11, he was very impressionable, had a good impression of the Capitol and what went on here. Now at the age of 18, he has no interest in politics whatsoever. We're trying to talk him into the campaign season and being on the trail. He says, no, Mom, I think I have to work. I don't think I can knock doors this year. But it's kind of difficult being the female on your home life. Mm-hmm. In that regard. So thank goodness for cell phones and being able to connect and text messaging. We text a lot during the day now because of course he's much better at texting than I am.
Yes, aren't they? Yes.
That was quite a transition to be from the mom at school. We have great hours as teachers. Sure. To be with our kids a lot. And being a legislator, we're only gone 4 months out of the year, so that's not too bad, but it's year-long, 4 months out of the year. And then even when you are home, there are a lot of responsibilities within the district that take away from family time. So I am very blessed to have a family who understands and is willing to give me up for public service. And I'm very blessed and very grateful that they allow me to do the job that I do. My husband is awesome. And before I come home on Thursday afternoons, he's cleaned the bathrooms and swept the floor and sometimes even mops the kitchen floor. So he's very awesome in the fact that he tries to keep the house together as best he can while I'm gone.
And he must be a pretty good cook.
He's a very good cook. He's a very good cook. And he's trying to figure out now that my son has graduated how he's going to cook for one. That will be interesting. But hopefully he can spend more time up here.
Sure.
In the next go round.
Well, while we're on that topic a little bit, if a woman came to you and asked what your advice would be if they were interested in going into politics, what would you tell them?
I would tell them first and foremost that they would need to pray very diligently because it is an awesome responsibility that God gives us to be responsible for the citizens of Oklahoma. Make sure that your husband is in full support of what you intend to do. And talk to your kids. But by all means, if those are all in agreement, jump in with both feet. It's a great time.
Well, what's been your biggest challenge in that regard then? But I guess maybe even the 10-year-old in Tulsa?
Well, there's a lot of different challenges I think that women face that men don't necessarily face because you have the family commitment on a different level. I don't think it's not any less intense than the man is, but in our world, the man is still the one who is absent from the home more often than the woman is. So you have that regard that you are absent from your family. You're not there to really keep the home fires burning. That most women, even a career woman, gets to come home at the end of the night and you're still reading the stories, you're still checking the homework, you're still doing the laundry. You have a sense of keeping the nest together. And there are wonderful men who do that job also. I don't want to discount that, but I can't do that long distance. That's a difficult thing, and as a woman, to be a mother is the most precious job that you can have. And I never want to discount that at all. And so it's been kind of hard to put that to the side for this amount of time that God has given me to do this job, and then to be able to go back and pick that up. That's very difficult. But also as a woman, we face other obstacles here in the legislature in the fact that it's mainly a man's world. We have 7 female senators, and it is a man's world up here. There are a whole different set of rules that we play by up here as women. Men can go get a drink at the bar, anytime with whomever, and there's no comment. They can go to dinner with whomever. They can go wherever they want to. Women are held by a very different standard in that regard. Women we go in a group, or we go together with women. You never have the freedom to just go with one other person somewhere. If I have somebody come in my office, I make sure my secretary is outside and my door is always open. There are no closed door meetings in my office. If my secretary is not out there, there's just a whole different playing field for women. We are judged more harshly, and we judge ourselves more harshly. I think we take our role much more serious. We are more apt to be better prepared, more passionate about our legislature, very, very much attached to the bills that we run. And I think we're just more sensitive to the needs of our constituents than our male counterparts are. Many of the males out here would say, don't get married to your legislation. And that's pretty much a typical phrase out here. I'm very married to the legislation I run out here, because what I run is for my constituents. It's something on their behalf. And I feel like I'm here to serve my constituents. And I'm very passionate about people and what we do for them. And so the legislation that I'm running, I'm very passionate about. If I wasn't very concerned about it and very committed to it, I wouldn't be running it. And so when I have somebody who doesn't believe in the legislation, or I can't convince that this is important, I take it personally, which is probably not the right thing to do, but that's just part of who I am and what I do.
Well, while we're talking a little bit about legislature, have you got any favorite bills or ones you're proudest of?
I am very proud of the fact that during my term in 8 years of office, we passed the early childhood legislation that got our 4-year-old programs into the public school system. Took a lot of heat over that one. I know Senator Fisher actually ran that one, but I did a lot of the behind the scenes work in the caucus that I was with to get that passed. I'm very, very proud of that. I know what a good benefit that has. In my own district, I have run some very important legislation. We had the sex offender home that was built in a residential neighborhood that my representative and I ran legislation to make sure that sex offenders could not reside in a residential neighborhood that had children present. That was extremely important for my district. And then we've also had some mining concerns about a blasting mine in the city of Sand Springs that I have worked on. Over the course of the 8 years that I've been here, we've had to run several pieces of legislation to protect the residents in Sand Springs. I'm very, very proud of those. One of the issues that I tackled early on was the ad valorem reimbursement fund that in the Bixby School District has a great financial impact when it's not fully funded. The citizens voted to allow businesses the ad valorem reimbursement when they developed a manufacturing plant that had so many jobs that eventually impacts the county because the taxes are not collected. They are reimbursed from the state. And the state didn't have a real good record of reimbursing the taxes. And one of the first things I did when I was out here was ask for an Attorney General's opinion about the validity of returning those tax dollars to the counties and to the schools. And he ruled that because it was a constitutional question, the state had to fund the ad valorem reimbursement account. And that, again, had a big impact on Bixby and the Bixby Public Schools. So we have made sure in the 8 years that we are out here that the legislature does not forget that that must be fully funded to our school systems.
Right. Do you have any currently in the works?
All of mine have been passed well, I ran 4 this year, and 2 of them have been signed out and passed down to the governor and signed out. The other 2 got lost in the house somewhere, and have one of them that's being put back into a conference committee report.
Well, when do you start the campaign trail this time around then?
When I'm through with the people's business this
In
Friday.
June? Oh, then it'll start the next day?
We start the very next day. Yes,
Okay.
we do. I try not to combine the 2. I feel like this is my full-time job. The people expect me to do the job they sent me down here to do.
Mhm.
But when the session is over, I will be on the doorsteps.
Has your office always been here?
No, it has not. We've moved around quite a bit. And we've been on the 5th floor every time except one. We had a brief stay down on the 4th floor for about 5 months. But we move offices every 2 years based on the seniority scale. And of course, we're with term limits, we're one of the oldest legislators out here as far as years. No, as far as age. That my secretary picks out our office. Always does a good job. She has to be here all the time. So I give her free reign at picking out my parking space and picking out the office because she basically has to work here 12 months out of the year. So I give her the choice where she wants to work, and I just camp out when I'm here. And she allows me to use the office. The 5th floor offices are very nice. They're very nice. My constituents are always very pleased when they come to visit that we're here. And I always have my page pictures on the wall. That is something that I've insisted on since we started, is that every year that we have pages, we take their pictures and they are on the wall so that when the kids come up, we have several tours that come through with our kids, that they always see their class members and the kids from their schools that are here. And it's a great testament to the kids, the lives that we've touched here at the state capitol. So I'm very pleased that we have all of them up there.
Oh, how long have you had the same secretary? Or
Sonia was hired in when I came. I was kind of adamant in the fact that I needed a secretary who didn't know more than I did in this job. I wanted us to start out together. And so I hired her from the outside. She came from the University of Central Oklahoma. And she submitted an application. And that was another thing on the first year that was out here. I'd never hired anybody. As an educator, you just have kids. You're in charge and you have kids. I've never hired anybody. I didn't know how to go through the interview process. But we went through and interviewed about 6 candidates at one point in time. And so I hired Sonia right out of the gate when I was elected. I think she came to work in December. So we've been together for 8 years. It's been a great combination. We are a team.
It takes that. I'm understanding it takes that here.
It takes both of us. Yes, it does. She does it. She is my keeper. She keeps me. She knows where I am at all times. And this year she has finally tied me to the BlackBerry, so she knows exactly where I am at all times. But she's great.
I'll talk a little bit about the committees that you've been on.
I haven't had too much of a diversity in the committee process. Of course, I was put on education as an educator, and I love that committee. I unfortunately was not on education appropriation, so I didn't get to deal with the dollar figures. But I have been on the education for the 8 years I've been here, dealing with public policy as far as education goes, and that's a great one because I'm able to bring forward the practicality of what we do at the legislature and how it impacts our school teachers. What happens when we change horses in midstream? Exactly what an unfunded mandate will do to a school. What does it mean when we say we will have a 15-minute program on so-and-so and so-and-so? And when you're saying, well, a 15-minute program, by the time you line kids up, get them down there, set them down, wait for everybody else to come in, that turns into a 30-minute program. By the time you line them up, get them up, bathroom break, everything else. So I bring a voice of reality to the education committee. So I've loved that one. I've always been on transportation and on Tuesdays, and that's a very good one for my district. Lots of good legislation, and again, you get to have one of those Gene Stipe stories. In transportation, he was the chairman of that committee. I had a bill that I ran my first year out here that I began work on a little bit late and didn't quite have all of my P's and Q's lined up, ready to roll, because I was waiting for some statistics from the Department of Transportation and the Department of Education. I was wanting to put speed zones on schools that were on a highway. Instead of people just zipping up and down the roads, I wanted them to slow down on the highways for our kids, and didn't have those statistics quite ready for presentation in committee. And Senator Stipe gave me a good chewing out about the fact that I didn't have all of my legislation ready to roll during the committee process. And I took that rebuke rather well and have always been prepared since then, before the bill is presented. The transportation has always been an important committee for me. I have been on wildlife and tourism, and that was an interesting committee. The first year I was out there because we had a lot of the cockfighting bills that ran through that committee. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, the very first committee in wildlife that I had. We had a cockfighting bill, and that was less than controversial in that committee. It was very interesting to watch Senator Sheridan, who I came to appreciate very, very much in the time that we were serving together, and his passion for his people and how very much he cared about what they cared about. So that was an interesting committee to be on. I now serve on the Human Resources Appropriation Committee on Wednesdays, which I am the vice chair or the co-chair of, which is new for me this year. Before that, I had been part of the Human Resources Committee, which deals with the healthcare department and the funding for the university hospitals and the Medicaid reimbursement. And I spent 6 years learning the Medicare and Medicaid system, and then was transferred over to the Department of Human Services appropriation budget. So that's a learning curve that I've had to pick up over the last 2 years. So I thought, with 6 years of experience, I kind of sort of know what I'm doing out here, and then they throw a wrench in it and give me a whole new committee that I've had to switch gears on. But that's okay. That's okay. The Lord puts you where he needs you to be. And it's been a good committee because it deals with the Oklahoma Juvenile Authority, which I have the Ellie Rader juvenile facility in my district. So we've had a great impact there in making sure that the state employees are taken care of and the kids are taken care of out there. Big responsibility in my district. Thursdays are for this year's retirement and insurance, which is a new committee. Very interesting committee, and my husband is an independent insurance agent, so I get a lot of advice for that committee from him. I usually send legislation or bring home legislation that has an impact on the insurance industry and let him peruse it and read it before we make any decisions in there. And we've had some retirement issues that go through that committee. Rules, I was the vice chair of rules 1 year, which really wasn't too big of a deal. We didn't do much with rules in the years past. It was just one of those committees that maybe 1 or 2 bills would go through. Not much going on there. I'm not on that one this year. Veterans Affairs was a committee that I loved, that I did not get to be put back on. I had at one point in time, I had 7 committees that I was on. In the 4th year that I was out here, 2 of them were standing committees, so they didn't meet all the time. But they narrowed us down to where we can only have 1 committee a day now. So I'm back to 4. But I was very passionate about being on the Veterans and Public Affairs, Government Affairs Committee, because veterans are a huge impact to me and the service that they have had for our country. And we don't always treat them right. So that was a very good committee for me to serve on, and I hope to be back on that one someday.
Well, do you have a mentor?
Unfortunately, no. Not in the state legislature, I don't. As far as my personal life and how I deal with things, my mother-in-law is the greatest person in the world. She has come through such diversity. Getting married at the age of 14 and having 5 births and losing 2 children in childbirth and the diversity of her life. And she does not have a high school education. but her life is just a testament to how God can use a woman. And watching her deal with her life and her kids and the disappointments that she's had in her life, and knowing that her kids haven't always been what she wanted them to be, but yet still loving them and being supportive for them and keeping them first and foremost in her life is a great inspiration to me, because it tells me and helps me to remember that people are what's important in this world. Your job is a means to an end. Your home is where you make people feel welcome. But people are why we're here. We are here to serve each other. We're here to glorify God in our relationships with others. And we're here to make a better place for those who are around us. And I learned that from my mother-in-law. She's an awesome lady.
It seems like you are too. So, let's see. We do need to touch on one thing, whether
Okay.
how much you want to go into it. It's up to you, though, is when you switch parties.
Okay, that's not a problem. Changing parties, again, it had a lot to do with people. It really did. I ran for lieutenant governor and was elected as a Republican senator, ran for lieutenant governor as a Republican. And there were several issues that fell into line and that made me really stop and rethink where the Republican Party was going. During the lieutenant governor's campaign, I was running against Todd Hyatt and Scott Pruitt, and the caucus members had pretty much determined that I was not the candidate in regards to Todd Hyatt and Scott Pruitt. And there was quite a bit of retaliation that went on in the fact that I had chosen to run, they thought, against Scott Pruitt, which I did not understand. It was an open seat. We all had an equal opportunity to run, and I had just as much of an opportunity and chance to win as anybody else did. And that was a job that I really wanted. It was a job that I had aspired to. Since being elected, I've watched Mary Fallon in the job of lieutenant governor, and I understand completely that the job of lieutenant governor is a PR job for the state of Oklahoma. And it was a job that I wanted. I didn't want it as a stepping stone to become governor. I wanted it to be a PR job for the state of Oklahoma. It was one that I really was very passionate over. But there were some things that happened during the course of time, and one of them was the fact that my caucus leaders said to me that your legislation will not be heard because you have opposed Scott Pruitt for lieutenant governor. And I said, my people deserve a voice, just like anybody else out here. Do not penalize them for what I decide to do as the lieutenant governor candidate. I was elected as a senator just like you were. My people deserve to have a voice just like your people do. And to have my 75,000 constituents disregarded here at the legislature was something that I could not abide. I could not do that. There was no reason that politics should have gotten in the way of my constituents having a voice at the state capitol. But that wasn't all that they did. There were some very ugly personal matters that went on with leadership against my family in that whole ordeal. And I said, when you cross the line because of who you think is the best candidate, let alone what the people think, and you decide that this is the best candidate and not let the people have a choice, and you use smear tactics to get me to step back, I can't go there either. And the more I was on the campaign trail throughout the state, I found that in the primary process, there was a blatant disregard for people who needed government services the most. It appeared to me in the process of going on a statewide basis that the Republican Party was meant only for the Leave It to Beaver world. The middle class, the upper class, the people who had their act together were only the privileged society with whom government could work with. And I have a totally different opinion. Having been on government services, having used government services, that's who the people are for. The government is for those who cannot help themselves. The government is a collective agency to help everyone who cannot help themselves, and to those who need a collective unit to build things like schools and roads and to provide public safety. It's not for those who can provide for themselves. And I said, that's not a party that my God and Savior came for. My Lord tells me that I'm to have compassion for everyone, and I'm to help those who need help. The Lord didn't come to save those who didn't need saving, because we all do. And I feel like the government is here to help those who cannot help themselves. And I said, I cannot be part of a party who disregards a majority of the population. And that's when I became a Democrat. Because I could not abide the principles in which I saw the Republican Party moving towards. And it caused quite a stir, and there are those who will say that I changed parties simply because I didn't win the lieutenant governor's race. And we got 25% of the vote on $40,000. We spent 13 cents a vote, as opposed to $1.5 million that Todd had spent. We were pleased with the turnout we had in the Republican primary on the vote that we got. We knew we were the underdog. We knew we were the long shot when we ran against those two. And to get 25% of the vote was overwhelming. It was very good. It had nothing to do with the fact that I came in third in the lieutenant governor's race.
No regrets, huh?
Doing the right thing is never hard. Living with the consequences is the hard part. So would I advise anybody else to change parties? No, I would not. It's been very difficult in the response that I've gotten from the Republicans. And I understand their point of view and the fact that they are not the majority party, and they blame that on me. But if they would stop and reflect, with the numbers in my district, it's a 60% Republican district. I sure didn't do it for political reasons. It's highly likely that I won't be reelected in my district because of my party switch, basing on the numbers. It wasn't something that I did for political reasons. And if they would stop and think about that, I would hope to goodness that they would change the policies that they make and the direction that they're going. But they haven't gotten that message yet, and I wouldn't want anybody else in the world to go through what I've been through. I really wouldn't. It's brutal.
You're holding up pretty well.
Thank you.
Are we flashing?
Put on my asbestos on our underwear every day.
Let's see, there was something else. You had a part to play with getting the portrait of Mrs. Lamar Looney hung.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we've done a lot of the paintings. We have the one that's behind me. That was one that I sponsored about Sand Springs, and Mrs. Looney was one that the Women's Caucus pulled together to hang here at the Capitol. Of course, Charlie Ford is the mentor behind all of the paintings here at the state capitol, and that was one that he came to the Women's Caucus and asked if we would like to sponsor that one. And we, as the Women's Caucus, pulled together our funds and had that one commissioned to hang in the Capitol on behalf of the women.
She was the first female senator, right?
Senator. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I noticed you were a Girl Scout.
I was a Girl Scout growing up, yes. My mom was the Scout leader. That was a great time. Had that to look forward to, and of course my mom's emphasis was always doing for others in the community. I remember several of the projects that we would do would be to, I remember one was we all made stuffed animals into the children's shelter. On a monthly basis we would go down and volunteer at the old folks home, as we called it, as the nursing center. So that was instilled at a very early age as a Girl Scout.
Several other women have have been Girl Scouts too. I think that's interesting.
It does.
And they're a Democratic whip.
I am the Democratic whip. I am. It's like herding cats. I'm the attendance monitor. They do. They call me and they tell me if they're going to be late or if they're not going to be here. I have to round them in for votes and take roll call votes to see how we're going to vote on an issue. And, I've been instrumental this year in gathering up, the last 2 years, making sure that we have a caucus meeting on a regular basis, get our people together and talk about that, which the Democrats never had before. They would just kind of caucus whenever they needed it. And I'm such a structured person. I said, no, I've got to meet once a week. I got to know what we're doing out here. So we've had a caucus meeting every week in the Lieutenant Governor's office for the past 2 years.
Well, let's say that you win the next 4 years. What's after that?
What's after the next 4 years?
Go back to teaching, or
I have that opportunity to go back to teaching, where you get to keep your certificate current as long as you're a legislator, and you don't have to take the professional development classes that educators do. But that would be a big step to go back to the classroom. I've kind of learned how to talk to adults now. I don't know that I can go back and talk to kids all day, although I miss it terribly. I was at a end of school assembly Friday, and I just miss those kids. It made me realize how much I miss those kids. There was kindergarten, first and second graders at the school assembly, and I just love those kids. So that is an option at that point in time. Of course, my husband is retirement age, so it gives us the flexibility with an empty nest to have all kinds of possibilities out there. We have 3 grandkids in Oregon that we would love to have the ability to go out and visit more often. And of course, my mother-in-law is in Oregon. That would be an option. But I just really, I have no plans at this point in time. I've learned that through this process of 8 years of being a senator, that God will point your feet where he needs them to be. So I'm trying to leave that door open.
go back for higher education.
That's a possibility. That's a possibility.
Go teach teachers.
I could teach teachers. That's true.
Okay. Do you have talk a little bit about your political philosophy? You've done that a little bit, but anything more specific you want to say about that?
I just want to do what's best for the people. As I said, my legislation is that which my constituents ask me to run on their behalf, and that's what I do. I don't have an agenda as far as running my legislation. Now, if I do in fact return next fall, and I'm still in the Human Resources Committee, I would like to overhaul the Department of Human Services. Separate that from the Children's Services and the Adult Services. I think we really need to sit down and think about how we treat people that are in the state's care, particularly with the issues that we've had with our foster care system lately, and deal with that. Go back and look at again on our juvenile justice system and get back into some of that and how we treat our kids and how long we keep them in the system and what we do with them. But the long-term goal, if I'm here for another 4 years, is to overhaul the Department of Human Services.
That's not yet. When? And I need to switch this back before we. Where's your seat on the floor?
My seat on the floor, I always like to sit on the wall in the back.
You get to choose?
You get to choose. It's on a seniority basis where you get to sit. And the school teacher in me says you never have anybody behind you. That's just something that you get when you're teaching, that that's bad mischief happens when there's people behind you. So I try to sit at the back, and this year I'm sitting on the wall in front of Senator Johnny Crutchfield of Appropriations. So I get to throw my plug in to Johnny every day on what I'm looking at and what I'm working on and how things are going and how the budget is progressing. And that way I can watch the entire floor. I can watch who comes in and out. And as part of the whip, it's my responsibility to watch for members who are off the floor and vote for them when they step back onto the floor and keep track of. I can see what's on front, but I can also keep an eye on who goes in and out of the door and who's on the telephones. So I do always try to sit in the back. Plus, I'm out of the way of the camera, so you can't see me from there. But it's on a seniority basis.
But it's not like you get front row. You get to choose whether or not you want to choose
wherever you want to sit. The only seats that are very specifically targeted is the pro tem sits in the front on one side, and the floor leader sits in the front in the middle. And those are the only 2 seats that are very definitely designated. They have telephones in those 2 desks so they can talk to whomever at any point in time. But everybody else gets to pick where they sit based on their years of service.
So how many different spots have you been in?
I have been in 3 spots. 3 spots, so that's not bad. And again, we change every 2 years. It's kind of like the office rotation every election cycle. You move up in the chain, so you get to choose. And our parking spaces are the same way.
When you drive to work, do you come down Lincoln?
I do come down Lincoln, and that is the most awesome experience to come down and see the dome. And of course, I was here during the dome process. Our office was, the crane was right outside our office as the dome construction was happening, and to watch the crane, the tallest crane in the state, with the people that were going up and down and the services that were going up and down, that was very exciting to watch. And my secretary had a birthday celebration for me, and we were all wearing hard hats because of the dome construction. And that was kind of neat. But I still get goosebumps when I drive down Lincoln Boulevard and look at the dome and look at the Capitol and know the position that I am in to help the citizens of Oklahoma. It's overwhelming sometimes, but it's very awesome.
And what are your feelings when you walk through the corridors out here? Similar, I guess.
Some days it's very similar. Some days I'm so harried over what the process for the day holds. The controversies that I know will be occurring, the political games that I know will be occurring, is very frustrating to me. I'm the kind of person that's just like, okay, get to the point, make your point, make your presentation, and let's vote on it, have an up or down vote, and move on. Let's not play games with it. Let's drop the politics at the door, and do the people's business. So some days it's extremely frustrating. But some days when it's quiet, I will stay a lot of times. After everybody else is gone, I'll be here till 6:37, answering emails, answering phone calls, and I'll walk down to the basement and just walk around where it's quiet down there and look up at the rotunda and look at all the way up to the top of the dome and just know what an awesome place this is. Number one, it's the most beautiful Capitol building in the United States with all the artwork that's here. But then to know that this is where we do the people's business is just very awe-inspiring. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to come and visit. I'm just very grateful to have been part of it.
Have you walked up the big steps from the outside?
Yes, the central staircase. The first time I had filed, I'd been here once as a Girl Scout, doing the tour years and years and years ago. Got caught in a snowstorm. Must have been over spring break because we got caught in a snowstorm. Had to spend the night in Oklahoma City with my Girl Scout troop. And then the day that I filed, we walked up that way and came all the way up. And that's the only other time I had been in the Capitol. So it was kind of a neat thing to come up and file to run for office. Having done that same kind of trip as a Girl Scout, as a young girl, and then do that and walk all the way up, it's very huge. And to have students come up and be able to walk through the building with students and kind of give them an insight as to what the paintings stand for and what we do here and all of the gilding and that that gives me great pride to do that as well.
Well, did you ride the train up to Guthrie for the?
Yes, we did. I wouldn't have missed that for the world for our celebration, our birthday celebration. Yes, rode the train and was involved in all of that, and have my Senate pin as the member of the Senate for its 100th birthday. That is so fun and such a great experience. And I was actually chosen to escort the governor into the legislative session in Guthrie. So that was very, very much a great experience. Wouldn't have missed it. It was fun.
Well, looking back, do you have a favorite memory for these 8 years?
It's filled with special moments. It really is, and those are probably one of the things that I'll have to sit back and reflect on. when I'm all said and done as to what the favorite moment really is. I know I had a blast this year. My son came up and paged for me this year. So that was a lot of fun. It was a different kind of experience because I actually got involved in what the page process is and how that works. So that was kind of different, but an experience that not everybody gets to have their kid come up and be a page and walk through that one. But every day brings a new element with it. And I try to look at every day in the fact that God has something to say through that day, whether it's for good or whether it's not so pleasant. There's a learning experience there somehow. And no matter what the day brings, it's a gift of God. And so at the close of every day, when I reflect and say thank you for the day that I've had, I say, Lord, present to me what you wanted me to learn today. And it does. It does.
How early do you get here?
Not as early as I used to. I've learned that my secretary likes to be here first. She likes to beat me to the office. And every now and then I like to beat her in the office just to prove that I can. I used to get here about 7:30. When I was first elected, I would come in about 7:30 and get my day started because I've learned that there are always people in the building and there's always somebody here that wants to see you. But I'm the kind of person that I have to get my day straightened out and organized and ready to roll before I start seeing people and it gets into the hodgepodge and the whirlwind activity that happens on an everyday basis. But a lot of that I take home with me at night now. When I first was elected, I would come up here and start about 7:30, stay through the day, leave about 6 o'clock every night, and then take home a stack of legislation to read with me at night because I read through it, still do. I read every bill that we vote on. I feel like that's part of my responsibility when I'm pushing that button is to know what it is I'm voting on. But I've learned over the years now that I trust Tanya to take care of the office that's here, and she'll let me know. And as I say, she's got me with an ankle monitor to where she knows where I am at all times. And if I need to be in the office, she lets me know that I need to be here. But I prepare for my day at the house before I come in. And then I do my Bible reading there at the house before I come to the office now. And I will be here. Usually I try to be here between 8 and 8:30 every day. Still pretty early. I still run those bell to bell like the school teachers do. Being here, I try to be in committee meeting when it starts. If they say the committee's going to be at 9, I'm there at 5 till. Usually the only one in the room, but I'm there on time, ready to roll. And excuse me, like I say, I try to return all my phone calls and my emails at the end of the day. So I'm usually here. My secretary leaves at 4:30, so I try to hang out with her until she's gone. And usually I'm here till 5 or 5:30 of an evening. And we usually have events or dinners and things like that in the evening. But I always make sure that I'm somewhere at 9 o'clock because that's the phone call from every night at 9 o'clock. It's a fun life.
Well, of the 5 children, any of them interested in politics then?
I don't think so. I don't think so. They all have their own life and their own desires, and that's the way it ought to be.
Well, but then at 18 and 19, you didn't either. So
no, I didn't. Absolutely not. So there's still time for them to jump in at some point in time. Think about it.
Well, is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to?
I think you've covered pretty well everything, and I've rambled through a lot. So.
You've done great.
Thank you.
I usually end with having the person answer this particular question. When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
That I was a woman of passion for the people. And that was my first and foremost goal, and that she accomplished it.
Just from what little I know, I think you have.
Well, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you talking with us today, and best wishes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This will be a great, great thing to have in the archives.